I just watched Monsters Inc. for the first time and laughed to myself at the clever people who divulge secrets by hiding them in plain sight. If you know what you're looking at, you know that Monsters Inc. has far more reality in it than it seems at first glance. Welcome to Fantasia. I'm your host, Laura Giles, and I'm here to talk about co creating from the heart. And to do anything, you first have to know what you're up against. Is there a force that is working against Earthlings, creating a heart centered reality? Is there a force that is assisting us? Let's take a look at Monsters Inc. and see. So, Monsters Inc. is an animated movie that came out in 2001. Monsters Inc. is a company that employs monsters who go into kids' rooms at night to scare them. The screams generate energy that powers Monstropolis. So I'm going to stop with the plot right there for a moment to talk about this. This is Loosh. As far as I know, Robert Monroe is the first to talk about it in his 1987 book, Far Journeys, which incidentally is our book for this month's book club in the private community. You're welcome to join us, and it's free. We read inspiring books that are usually spiritual, either directly or indirectly, and meet once a month. The link is in the show notes if you're interested in joining us. Anyway, Robert Monroe is the creator of the Monroe Institutes, HemiSync, and the Gateway Protocol. He studied altered states of consciousness and was the person who coined the phrase out-of-body experiences. So he didn't actually make it up, but he popularized it. And he developed technology and techniques to help people astral travel and engage in remote viewing. None of this is about religion, politics, or a belief system. It was and still is devoid of ideological slants. Monroe just recorded what people experienced, and Monroe experienced Loosh. So what is Loosh? Well, while in an out-of-body experience, Monroe had contact with a light being who told him that humans and animals are a fuel source for our creators. They got energy from negative emotions, from when we die, when there's an adrenaline surge, when we suffer, worship, and when we're lonely. It can come from greed, cruelty, scarcity, or victimization. So basically, just like Monsters Inc., they're feeding off of us. They're using us for a fuel source, except that it's not just our screams they want, but our suffering. Let's break down the details, because when I went to research this, I came across all kinds of conflicting things and things that Robert Monroe just didn't say. He wrote what the entity said, and it's non-standard English and hard to understand. I had to listen to it twice and read it once, but I think I got it. If I made any translation errors, feel free to send your interpretation in the comments. Okay, here goes. So these are intergalactic entities that want Loosh. Maybe it's an energy source, maybe it's a drug, whatever it is, it's highly desirable, naturally occurring in their realm, and rare, kind of like diamonds here. They want it, and someone got this bright idea to try to manufacture it. Lots of people want gemstones, and someone here figured out a way to create them in a lab. They are free from impurities, a lot cheaper, can be produced a lot faster, and cost a lot less than those found in nature. So it's very much like that. So this entity created a garden to grow Loosh, and that garden is on Earth. This garden has to have the properties of oxygen and carbon in the proper balance. It needs a source of radiation, which is presumably the sun. Without these elements, Loosh cannot be created. Now, the first crop of Loosh producers were single-celled organisms that lived in the water, and they did produce Loosh, but only upon death. It was also low in quantity and quality, so it wasn't worth it to pursue this. However, the creator had enough information about what worked and what didn't to tweak the experiment and try again. I'm calling it a he because we use pronouns to communicate. I don't know anything about the gender of this creator, but the creator kept the first batch, and he created a second crop, and these were plants. He created wind to help them with reseeding so they'd be self-replicating. The wind could also blow down lots of plants and assist with the harvest, because remember that they got loose when the organism died. So wind was also handy, because if they needed a large bunch of Loosh all at once, they would just conjure a storm and voila, they could harvest a large crop instantly. Unfortunately, the lifespan of these plants was too long and the quality was too low, so this wasn't ideal either. It was back to the drawing board for the creator. The creator switched things up with a third crop and created big animals. Maybe dinosaurs, maybe giants, I don't know, but they were big and slow. He started with the first crop, the single celled water based organisms, and modified them to eat plants and live on the land. When they ate, the plants died and produced low grade loosh in large quantities. These animals had long lifespans and were eating up all the plants. This was threatening both the plants with extinction and themselves because the food source was becoming scarce. Soon the animals were competing with each other for food. The creator noticed that their conflict produced high quantities of pollution, high quality. And this was the elusive formula that they were looking for because up until now it was all poor quality and poor quantity or both. The creator had to do something because the ecosystem wasn't stable. He wanted to capitalize on this new information, so he did a revamp. He made the next generation, or version 3.1, smaller. He made them omnivores instead of herbivores, so they had a greater choice of food options. These changes solved the extinction threat because now they could eat each other as well as plants. It also provided them with a constant supply of loosh. This was such a great upgrade that they killed off version 3 in one fell swoop. But he's still tweaking the design, and the fourth crop started again with a single celled aquatic organism. He made it multicellular, mobile, and balanced. I think that means bilateral symmetry, meaning the right side roughly mirrors the left, and we have two arms, two legs, and two eyes. And these organisms were both herbivores and omnivores, and this system was balanced and self sustaining. Now, the creator went to another land area and modified the second crop by making new varieties of plants for the modified fourth crop to eat. He gave this modified fourth crop talons, claws, furs, stingers, camouflage, horns, beaks, speed, cunning, and ways to engage in and evade conflict. Because conflict and death create high quality loosh, this gave each organism more chances within a lifetime to create loosh. As a side project, someone designed a weak animal that lacked the advantages of the fur, the claw, and the beaks. And he gave this omnivore something that the others didn't have. He gave him a piece of himself to stimulate unceasing mobility. So, as an aside, this might have been the Sumerian trickster god Enki and Ninki, who are said to have fashioned men from blood and clay as servants to the gods. Enki's brother Enlil found the humans bothersome and sent a flood to wipe them out, but Enki saved them over and over again, and the gods agreed to stop trying to wipe them out if Enki made sure they would die before they had the chance to overrun the earth. Anyway, this new creature would always seek union with the infinite whole, so it would not only be motivated by food or survival, and the needs couldn't be satisfied throughout the garden. This conflict could create a potentially endless supply of loosh. Now that the experiment was a proven success, others began to build their gardens as there still wasn't enough loosh to satisfy the demand. This loosh garden was pretty much self-sustaining and was left mostly untended, except one day a creator came back to observe his creation and noticed that there was a unit in the fourth crop struggling to protect its offspring from death. It released high quality distilled loosh, so the purity was through the roof. He continued to observe and noticed another unit who was also producing high quality distilled loosh, who wasn't fighting to protect its young. This one was lonely. When the creature was noticed by this unit, it fell to the ground and began to cry. This also produced high quality distilled loosh. Through this observation, the creator learned that protecting the young, and I'm not sure what this is, so love, empathy, desperation, and adrenaline release, not sure. But protecting the young, having experiences of awe or religious experiences, and loneliness produces lots of high quality loosh. Naturally, they wanted more of that. In order to ensure unfulfillment, the creator split the units in half so that they would feel forced to seek out reunion. So that's Plato's story of soulmates. He also created other dynamics like making half of the units dominant to encourage maximum conflict. So, to put it all in a neat bundle, loosh is a desirable thing that is released and produced from death, struggle, misery, love, freedom, awe, ownership, ambition, famine, religion, disease, guilt, and all the things that we think of as a human experience. We were designed to host parasites who set us up biologically to struggle and be miserable because they benefit from it. So that's a pretty wild story, isn't it? But let's take a look at the evidence. The wheel of life is set up so that every creature is food for someone else. Animals eat plants and other animals. Life and death go hand in hand because life is sustained by death. Trees die so that we have fire, warmth, and shelter. Plants and animals die so that we have food. Other animals eat plants and animals. So nature is a balanced system that gives us oxygen, carbon dioxide, and balances the two. The seasons also help to keep life balanced. All that's true. So if the creators were setting up a power plant called Earth that would give them energy to live longer, might they set up a system where the circle of life requires different life forms to eat each other to survive and sustain the ecosystem? Might they create antagonistic duality where people and creatures were afraid of each other and fought each other? That's what we have. That would explain why. This also explains why good things happen to bad people and the good die young. We yearn for spiritual justice, but we don't see it when we look around. This could explain why there's always war and conflict somewhere. I mean, we just saw this in the last election. I saw so many people who judged other people as inferior and not fit to live because they have a different political opinion. In Monsters Inc., they had a meter to show how much loose they got from each scare. Imagine how much loose is being produced by all the Karens and the people ranting on social media who get other people like them ramped up too. Do you think things like racism, politics, religion, and economics set people against each other? Do you ever wonder if that's why they might exist? Maybe the point of it isn't to see who is superior or right. Maybe the whole point of it is to simply see what generates the most loosh for the creators. What about the stories of alien abductions? They take these people for their sperm and eggs and then put them back. Are they doing this as part of an upgrade system to create even more superior loosh creating organisms? Is naturally producing babies taking too long and they want to speed up the process by making them in artificial wombs? Is this what people are talking about when they say we live on a prison planet and our souls are harvested at death? Is this what they're talking about when they say don't go into the light? Is this why they say that aliens stop nuclear weapons from going off? Is it all about not wanting to blow up the planet and mess up their loosh factory? In mythology, there are many stories of the creators or gods taking sides in wars and helping out their heroes. Is this a reflection of how many creators have their own gardens? Are they just protecting their supply? During World War II, pilots reported UFOs in the sky. Some seem to help their side, some seem to help the other side. Is this one creator trying to expand his garden by conquering the space of the person next to him? The Bible says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." This is a commandment. There was only one. There'd be no need to say that. If I don't have fangs, I don't mention that in my dating profile because who would assume that I do? There's no need. Is this because there are many creators of gardens? Are spiritual visitations and miracles done to entice us to worship and to create loosh? Do religions exist to generate loosh? Genesis says that the first man and woman were created in the Garden of Eden. Is this the original loosh garden? One thing I noticed right away from Monsters Inc. is that even though the monsters are the ones doing the scaring, they aren't the bad guys. They're just doing their jobs. The bad guy is the company that is hiring them to do it. And this gets to be very clear by the end of the movie. So there's a competition going on to see who gets the most scares. And Sully's the champion, but Randall is right behind him. Now, they're only supposed to scare little kids. They're never supposed to touch the kids because they think that the kids are toxic. Well, one night, Sully goes to scare a little girl and she follows him back to Monstropolis. This isn't supposed to happen. So Sully and his sidekick, Mike, have to get her back before anyone notices. So Randall, his competitor, sees the girl and kidnaps her. And Randall has a plot to kidnap kids and extract their screams because using a scream is a lot easier, I guess, than going boo and getting the scream. So Sully is now fond of the little girl and he doesn't want him to do that. So he rescues her and tells his boss. Well, guess what? His boss is in on it. Sully and Mike find a way to expose the whole plot and it all ends well. So they get the little girl home. Sully ends up being the new manager of the energy plant because of his time with the little girl. He discovers that laughter is energy too. So he re engineers the plant to harvest energy from happiness, and everything ends on a happy note. So, this whole plot is exactly like Robert Monroe's Loosh story. Whether you scream or laugh, you generate Loosh. Does that bother you? It bothered me at first because there isn't any permission. I'm not being asked to participate in this program. I'm in it involuntarily. Then I thought about the trees generating oxygen. They aren't being asked if I can use that oxygen, but it's there and I breathe it in all day long. So I guess when you look at it that way, nobody is being harmed by the passive consumption of something that is just there and available. But there's still the issue of the game being set up to make us live in conflict and misery. That bothers me tremendously. Robert Monroe doesn't say this specifically, but in my mind, this is a prism system where we are only recycled through reincarnation after death. Could be wrong about that. If so, someone let me know in the comments, but I have a suspicion that these creators are a bit afraid of us. Many of the mythologies tell of a hierarchy of gods that get overthrown by their children. It happened in Sumerian mythology. It happened in Greek mythology when the Olympians overthrew the Titans. I think that humans fear that we'll be overtaken by our creation, the robots. Since we are imbued with the essence of our creators, do they fear we will overtake them? Is that even possible? Or might we at least escape the prison of their making? Now, I might be a Pollyanna, probably am, but I think that it's not a coincidence that Monsters, Inc. was made. I mean, how many movies have you seen where art imitates life? You know, there's something in the ether, an idea is captured. Someone writes a book or makes a movie and it ends up being exactly what happens. Or maybe it's just personal to you, but it's exactly what you need to see. And it gives you the keys to the kingdom. I believe that we have spirit guides who are rooting for us to escape the matrix or the reincarnation cycle of being a human battery. Keeping things way simple, I think that Monsters Inc. has given us that way out. As long as we are victims who are following a script of reacting when our buttons are pushed or just living unconsciously, we're batteries. We're part of a loosh farm in a dog-eat-dog world. Once we become conscious and start living a conscious, heart-led, high vibrational life, I think it all changes. We're no longer participating in an antagonistic duality, but in a complementary duality where everything is happening for you, like the creation of the movie Monsters, Inc. to show you the way out. You're no longer using people as resources. You're having a relational experience with all that is. The plants become your sisters. The animals are your brothers. The sky is your father and the earth is your mother. You are everything and everything is you. Nothing is an enemy but a reflection of you. Doesn't that sound a lot better than fearing everything, conquering, destroying, and having power over people and things? When the world is your equal, you're humble and grateful. You honor the sacrifice that the chicken gave, that you can eat him and sustain your life. You treat his family well and don't take more than you need. You think about what you're planting so that the earth's creature can have food and places to live. You're not just planting big, showy flowers and one type of grass that is uniformly green and looks pretty. You celebrate diversity and plant plants that need each other to thrive. For example, Native Americans typically planted beans, squash, and corn together because corn grows tall and straight, giving the beans a natural trellis to climb, and the beans and the corn were planted in a hill. So squash were planted between the hills, and squash, having big leaves, could shade the ground, and this keeps the weeds from growing and keeps the ground from drying out. But all of these plants grow better together than when they're planted as a single monocrop. So it just makes sense. If something is good for the plants and for you, it's a win-win. Now, this doesn't mean that we stop eating corns, beans, and squash, but when you raise it with love and respect and eat it with gratitude, doesn't that change the whole energy? When you gave love that nourished that plant, when you eat it, it has more nourishing energy to give you. That's reciprocity, not a transaction. That's a relationship, not a cold harvest that's all about you. I think about agriculture and how we raise animals in factory types of settings with no love or care. We stick them full of drugs to make sure they don't get sick and make them fatter. Then we coldly slaughter them. And that sounds just awful. But it's essentially the same type of loosh garden that we're a part of. When you think about how humans could be in exactly the same type of situation, it's karma, isn't it? We're put in these societies where we're shown all this advertisement that makes us want these luxury items, fancy vacations, and pretty partners. When we look at our own lives, we feel inadequate and dull in comparison and just get depressed. Cha-ching! Up goes the loosh meter. We see news stories about people fighting each other, child trafficking, war, violence, poverty, pornography, and our tolerance for ugliness just goes up and up. We're traumatized just from watching the news and we don't even know it. Meanwhile, our desperation and isolation meter is churning out the loosh. I'm a trauma therapist, and I see the results of growing up with so much negativity. Do you know that I have a lot of clients who weren't beaten, not starved, not sexually assaulted, and didn't have parents who were alcoholics or drug addicts, but their nervous system is reacting as if they did because they were traumatized by growing up in a household where parents didn't have the emotional intelligence, couldn't regulate their emotions. So even though violence, abuse, or misuse of sex is not optimal for creating a heart-led life, your environment doesn't have to include any of that for you to be a loosh factory. When you're little and you grow up with someone who's emotionally unstable, you think that it's your job to stabilize them. Why? Well, two reasons. The first is your life depends upon it. When you're little, you can't do anything for yourself. You rely on a grown-up to feed you, clothe you, soothe you, clean you, protect you, everything. If you aren't cute enough to inspire that, you could die. So you figure out how to get their attention because your survival depends upon it. The second reason is that as a tiny person, you think that everything revolves around you. If something goes right, it's because of you. If something goes wrong, that's because of you too. Everything is personal because you don't have the ability to reason or see yourself as separate yet. So if mom's depressed and not responding to you, you think it's your fault. You must be a horrible person. And that begins your low self-esteem, lack of confidence, and depression. Yeah, that's how it starts. Sounds kind of ridiculous, but there you have it. A tiny little Loosh factory, and you're only 2 years old. So let me tell you my experience with Loosh. This may not be true. It's just my perception of events. And there could be others. The event is true, but my perception and interpretation may be off. So I'm sleeping and my dogs wake me up enough that I'm lucid. What I mean is I'm still asleep, but I'm also aware of what's happening in the room around me. That type of awareness that happens to me a lot. So anyway, I have this dreamlike experience of seeing a male figure on my front porch, and my dogs in real life are going insane. And this man somehow gets through the door and comes up the stairs. And I'm still in bed with my eyes closed, wondering how he got in since he doesn't have the key, and what is he doing here? So now he's standing in the doorway of my room, and I'm scared because there's a man in my room. And I notice that he's not advancing. He's not threatening. He's just standing there. So I realize that his intention is not to get me. It appears that he simply wants to scare me. And I'm determined not to give him that satisfaction. So I calm myself down and tell him to leave. And he doesn't leave right away. So I start sending him love. And that's when he leaves. Now, I didn't have the first notion of what um, Loosh was when this happened, but I am sure I felt convinced that he was after emotional reaction, and I felt convinced that he wasn't after love. And when I first heard of Loosh, it made perfect sense to me because of that experience. And that wasn't my only experience like that. I've had many. It's exactly like Monsters Inc. I felt provoked to anger, and each time I was conscious enough to refuse. Sometimes I could see it coming, and sometimes I caught myself after the anger or fear had started, but I was always aware enough to say, "You're not going to get my loosh. I am not your energy source. Go somewhere else." So I've heard, and because of my experiences, this makes sense that in order for energy to be harvested, there has to be a negative emotion and a strong intention. The two create the combination where the energy harvesting can happen. What are examples of a strong intention plus a strong emotion. So anxiety plus the desire not to feel that way is an example. I have lots of clients with high anxiety and they judge themselves or are afraid of what could happen if their anxiety gets out of control, which only makes it stronger. That is a Loosh factory in the works. Revenge is another example. If I'm angry that somebody got over on me, that's a strong emotion. My intention to get them back is a strong intention. That's an instant Loosh factory. Predatory courtship is another example. So let's say I'm a guy who's always on the prowl. My intention is to have sex that night and my emotion is lust. So do you think that bars and nightclubs are rocking with Loosh? You bet. No judgment. I spent my fair share of time there. But when you know better, you do better. A competitive workplace could be another example. Let's say that I work in car sales and I want to win that cruise that my boss is dangling in all our faces. My strong intention is to win, and the strong negative emotion could be anxiety. These are everyday types of situations. Just playing a video game could create hours of nonstop loosh. I don't want my character to die. There's a strong intention. If I'm being chased or stalked in the game, there's strong anxiety. Or if I'm on social media and someone says something that I take offense to, well, now all of a sudden I'm angry or offended. I have a strong intention to tell them how stupid they are. Road rage is another similar type of thing that produces loosh. It's all around us. We're perfect loosh monsters, just generating tons and tons of loosh for the creators of this world. When we are wounded or traumatized, we unknowingly become generators of loosh for other people. We bring drama and wreak havoc and have no idea because we're in our self-righteousness. We feel entitled and right. Maybe we even feel powerful when we provoke other people to anger or when we dominate or manipulate them. So we're feeding off their loosh as we create loosh that others can feed on. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, right? In the world of narcissists, we call that supply, and that fits, doesn't it? A narcissist needs other people's adoration, drama, confusion, and emotions to feel alive. If you love me, then I am worthy of feeling loved. If you're yelling at me, well, I'm still the center of attention and I'm thriving on it. That's how it works with a narcissist. I eat up your emotion and leave you feeling crazy and utterly confused. Then you learn not to trust yourself and start looking outside of yourself for validation. Your relationship becomes about needing validation rather than actually having a reciprocal, equal relationship where both parties can show up as themselves, be seen honestly, and connect with vulnerability. And the more that we indulge in these narcissistic relationships, the further away we get from real love because narcissism is about me. It's one-sided. Real love is about we. We're even taught to want this unhealthy relationship from the crib. So most fairy tales tell of a pretty but dirt poor girl who sees a prince. They fall in love at a glance, have a magical day, and then all of a sudden they're, love at first sight. And there's some hurdle they have to overcome, and then they get married. That soulmate myth is probably a narcissistic relationship. It's probably love bombing. Your heart swells so big, and that's followed by a gigantic letdown. You spend the rest of your relationship trying to get back to that wonderful beginning, but you never do because it was never real. Meanwhile, all your friends who haven't had the love bombing experience are feeling like total losers because nobody swept them off their feet in a 6-week courtship. This disappointment and loneliness may create more loosh. All this is to say that I can see how that story that Robert Monroe got while in his out-of-body experience certainly looks like it could be true. But there is good news, and Monsters, Inc. shows that too. It shows that through positive emotions and positive intentions, you can be used as energy to empower you. Generally speaking, I don't believe in manifestation the way that I hear it popularly talked about, but I do believe that we create our own reality through our unconscious beliefs. And when we have positive emotions and positive intentions, what we create must be for our own good and the greater good. It must be heart-led. I don't think we can create wealth for ourselves from that space. In the heart space, we know that we're all connected and a rising tide lifts all boats. So we want to bless everybody, not just ourselves. There's no desire for me to win and you to lose. It's always looking for the win-win and the collective connection, growth, a blessing. Now, I don't think that this means that we're all love and light and can't have any negative emotions. I think that it's a reflection of toxic positivity and that that's just fake. Sadness, anger, and jealousy, shame, guilt, they're all normal. Emotions are normal. There's no bad emotions. We just need to be genuine. That said, we can react in emotional ways that don't fit the facts. We can be emotionally out of control, but there are no bad emotions. Learning how to express in ways that are healthy is probably the first thing to do if you feel emotionally out of control. Another thing you can do is to heal your trauma. Trauma is contagious. If we have it, the chance of us passing it along to someone else is pretty high. That's probably how we got it. So even though it's not your fault how you got it, it's your responsibility to clean it up so that it ends with you. That's not easy, but it is possible. Another thing that you can do to end the cycle of energy harvesting is to clean up your environment. Look at all the ways that you make yourself vulnerable to being used as a loosh factory. I'd probably give up watching network news. It's all bad news all the time. I'd limit social media exposure unless you have an algorithm that gives you kittens, jokes, and knitting memes. Typically, that's not what most people see. It's post after post that provokes anger and divisiveness. I say this over and over. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If those 5 people aren't positive, high vibe people, I'd go finding some new friends, coworkers, or family members. It really matters. Check your language. Words are energy. If you speak profanity, especially saying F you, you're a leash factory. This is literally a curse. You're cursing people. Be conscious of what you're saying. Mean what you're saying. Say what you mean. If you're leading from the heart, you're not cursing people. Cultivate humility. The only way to truly have empathy is to be on everyone's level. You're not above anyone. You're not below them. You are them. They are you. When you are on someone else's level, it's easier to connect, and connected people have a harder time abusing each other because it's personal. It hurts to do that, so we don't. I'd also learn to let things go. Holding on to anger, resentment, fear, or any emotion keeps you from tapping into your heart because love flows when you're open and relaxed. And holding on to emotions block that flow of energy, and not just love. Love lies underneath. All that other stuff has to get out of the way to access it fully. And I say this because I see it every day. Every day I take people to the place where their love lies, and it never fails. It's always there. You just have to move the other stuff out of the way to get there sometimes. Another powerful suggestion is to remember that you aren't taking anything with you when you die. Not your stuff, not your name, your body, or your big ideas. If you can really digest that, then it becomes a lot easier to let things go, release the ego, just keep going no matter what happens. Most of the things that get us down really are not that serious. We really do feel better in the morning, or maybe 100 mornings, but whatever it is, it can pass if you let it. Even major disasters don't have to be a big deal. If you talk to soldiers and people who survive war, they often have stories of feeling the most connected then because everyone was in the same boat. They all had each other's back, and they were a community who was working together for a common cause. Keeping in mind that everything is going to end in death makes it all smaller for me. If I want to do something that feels a bit risky, like, what will everybody say? I just remember that nobody's paying attention to me, and a week from now, it'll all be forgotten if it goes badly. But if it succeeds, whatever it is might give me some happiness or success, so why not? But I'll tell you what does follow you after death, and that's your emotional baggage. And I say this because I work as a trauma therapist and a past life regression facilitator. The body keeps the score, and all your emotional baggage is in your body. And if you don't clean that up, when you come back, you will come back with all that energy weighing you down. And I believe that's why the suicide rate is up. There gets to be this point at which it's just too much to carry. But dying is not a get out of jail free card. If you die with guilt, shame, fear, or whatever, it'll be here when you get back. Seeing that play out over and over has been a major motivator for me to clean up my garbage whenever I become aware of it. It's like the chains that Jacob Marley wears in A Christmas Carol. So love and forgiveness, and I mean self-forgiveness, because nobody has to do that for you, are great healers, and it can be that easy, but it usually isn't. We want to do the self-flagellation and feel that we have to be worthy of forgiveness if we don't. I mean, how would you even measure that anyway? In my eyes, asking forgiveness makes you worthy of it. That's it. That's all. Finally, I'd also suggest that you lose your fear of death, if that applies to you. The fear of death makes people do things they shouldn't and not do things they should. One of the most powerful questions I've ever heard is, what would you do if you knew that you could not die? Typically, the fear of death makes us all play small, conservative, and act from fear. Remember the movie Groundhog Day? When the main character knew he couldn't die, he started switching things up. He took chances. He learned things. He's a pretty slow learner, but he finally caught on that vulnerability, authenticity, and heart-led existence was more fulfilling than a hopeless, heartless, manipulative, and fake one. When things hurt us, we collapse in on ourselves to protect ourselves from being hurt again. We close down. But what if we can never really be hurt because we're this magnificent love? Yeah. What if it's just an illusion to make us forget the amazing possibilities and the beings that we are and always were? Just something to ponder. I don't know what Loosh is. Looks like adrenaline or adrenochrome, but I think that it seems like a pretty low vibrational energy. So even though Monroe said that love generates Loosh, I think it's more like desire or possession or ownership. Maybe this thing that we call love isn't that. I don't think it is. I think Lucia is a vibrational thing, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I don't think love is on the same vibrational frequency as pain, loneliness, and dying. So for now, I'm dealing with this information by being as misery free and producing as little misery as I can. If I get more information that says this is an effective path, I'll keep going. If it's ineffective, then I'll switch it up. So let me know if I'm off track. I don't like the idea of battling evil because judging others as evil just feels dark and divisive. I am them and they are me. Loving and accepting people works better for me. I admire Gandhi for bringing independence to India through peace. That's such an awesome achievement. And Dr. Martin Luther King brought civil rights to America peacefully. Imagine if we could end human bondage peacefully. I'm going to try. Feel free to join me. And if Loose is just a story, a metaphor, a complete fabrication, we lose nothing. So I count it as a win-win. Let me know your thoughts and experiences. I'd love to know if you haven't experienced any Loosh siphoning. Subscribe and be sure to be here next week. Ciao, guys.